There, now we're live. Okay. Well, thanks for everyone for, oops, here comes Sheila. She's joining from LOC, Leona Outdoor Center, I think. So I want to jump right in. We'll start with introductions. Then we'll talk a little, Brandy will talk to the audience about how to submit questions. And so why don't we just go down the line and introduce ourselves. Sandra Scott, Associate Superintendent for TCAPS, and just kind of go right down the line. Why don't you go ahead, Angela? Why don't we go with you next?
Okay. Angela Williford, music teacher at Westwoods in Interlaken.
Brandy. Okay, that's Brandy Reynolds. She helps us with the
technology department. I was on mute, sorry.
All right, how about David and TAC?
Hi, I'm David Noller. I'm an English teacher and technology coordinator at West High School.
And I'm Tech Reddy. I'm a social studies government teacher at West High School.
Jesse?
I am Jessie Houghton. I'm the principal at Westwoods Elementary, and I'm also the K-12 math curriculum director for TCAPS.
Joe?
I'm Joe Esper. I'm the principal at West Senior High.
And Sheila, I don't know if your signal's the strongest there at LOC, but go ahead and just introduce yourself.
Hi. I will. It is not very great out here. I know my internet is very weak. Sheila Fehrenbach with Westwoods, currently at Camp LOC.
All right. Okay, so Brandy, if you would go ahead and talk the audience through how to submit questions.
If you're watching at home, you should just be able to click on the Q&A, which will show up with the active live on air, and you can submit questions, and it will say ask a question here, and they will show up for us to see the answer. And then as we're answering those questions, we can use that for future viewers to quickly jump ahead to specific questions that were answered throughout the Hangout. So feel free to type your questions in, and we'll answer them as we see them.
Okay, so let's jump right into the subject matter here. Basically, what we've been trying to do is to gather input from teachers. We've done that with our district school improvement team, which consists of about 50 teachers and principals from across the district. We've also done this with the TCEA board of directors. I think Rick said there were about 25 folks there at the MEA office that provided input around this question, and then now we are doing this Google Hangout to provide the people on the panel here that just introduced themselves with the opportunity, but then also anyone across the district can view this Hangout and ask questions and participate. So, so really, let's go ahead and get started here with. I don't know what you're doing there, Brandy. The options here are the first one. So we'll just go through them each one, and we'll ask some clarifying questions before we get into, just so that we go through and have an understanding of what each of the options are. The first one is common elements district-wide. So the first one to consider would be that this year, for example, everyone across the district, the elements that were that we started with and emphasized were all the same across the district. Elements 1, 2, 6, and 24. So right now we're not saying it will be those elements again necessarily, but we're just saying that we're keeping this at a conceptual level. That the first option to discuss would be, do we keep them the same across the district? Okay. So do you have any questions about what that means, the option? I mean, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but I'll entertain any questions from anyone on the panel about number one before we dig into Well, I guess let's just dig into the strengths opportunities. Let's just go one by one here. So, what do you have to say about that one? Tack, don't hold back. I know you've been waiting.
Well,
Remember, you
while other
might be
people
muted.
are formulating their thoughts there, I think the obvious advantage of staying with number one is that we have some longevity with the same focus, which is probably something that gets in the way sometimes is shifting focus year to year and not sticking with stuff until it gets to the tipping point. Particularly, learning goals and scales and tracking student progress are things that you can build systems for quickly, but you can't get you can't build them at a deep level where students are really engaging in tracking student progress the way Marzano writes about it. That probably doesn't happen in 1 year. So there's always work to do on those items, and sticking with something long term is probably a benefit.
Yeah, Xander, I know that Westwoods teachers talked about it last week a little bit. We've just kind of been talking about that goal, and I think the idea that you could decide that you were kind of finished with element 1 and 2 is really not what we're about here. We're about helping kids get somewhere, and to just say that you could not know where you're going and that would all be okay because we spent a year on it is clearly not how this works for us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What I also heard from when I was at the meeting with the teachers Monday, was it Sander? Some other things about the strengths with this particular approach would be it's good for new hires, so we would be doing some things that were consistent with new people being evaluated. It's focused. We're actually getting good at something versus just trying something. Some people are good at it, some people aren't ready for the next thing, and then we're already moving on down the road. Again, a lot of what was already mentioned, it's good practice. It aligns with the work that Hattie is talking about in his research, and I think one thing we mentioned at that meeting on Monday with the union leaders was just simply that there are some people who are ready for something else, but there are a lot of people who have not completed the work when it comes to learning goals and scales. There's lots of backward unit plans to be developed yet, and lots of preps that don't have all the unit plans and goals and scales that they would hope to have. So some consistency with that and focused work on that would be helpful across the district.
Can I jump in? So I would say that the things that you guys mentioned as positives are still available as options for any teacher who wants to stick with 1, 2, 6, and 24, for instance. Because there's nothing to, if their teachers are given choice, then they have that option of sticking with and continuing on the same thing that they worked on the last year. So I would say that there's no downside to getting away from number 1. And of course, the downside is that it's very cookie cutter, that it is not the same. Not every teacher needs the same to work on the same thing. Some teachers are good at certain things already, and they would like to focus on other things that they're not as good as, and there's no option for variety with we ask our teachers when we're dealing with students to make sure that we differentiate our instruction, and I think the same thing should be the option for teachers to administrators to differentiate instruction with their teachers depending upon where they are and what they need.
So we're going on weaknesses now, because that would be one of the ones that we brought up too.
It's almost, well, I guess it would be. It's kind of a sideways strength too, because I kind of feel like with my evaluation this year that I was able to do the 1, 2, 6, and 24, but also bring in those other things that I knew I could demonstrate that would show my growth and my strengths. So I think I'm feeling it not in the same way that TAC is, but that I'm able to do 1, 2, 6, and 24. We can talk about those. But if I'm able to show some other things that are more in line with my style, my personal strengths, my personal approach, my philosophy, that I can both do, and I know this is getting into the hybrid thing later, but I can do those things that we want to focus on as a district, as well as those things that are valuable to me personally as a professional, if that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I guess can you put back the visual back up, Brandy, on the full screen? I guess we probably ought to just go through them all because you start talking about one and it really bleeds into the other. So number 2 is really what TAC, I think, was when TAC was going through the weaknesses of number 1, he was really advocating for number 2, and that would just mean that sort of open, free choice for teachers to choose 4 elements of their choosing is really what number 2 is. Number 3 is to differentiate based on, effect size, or really it should just be data, based on data. And the data could be, student achievement data. It could be, again, keeping this at a conceptual level. Could be effectiveness rating. So this idea that when a teacher says, "Hey, all my kids are knocking it out of the park. My student achievement data shows it. I ought to be able to do what I want." And maybe if you have concerns over teachers who are less effective or who aren't getting the results that we expect, then maybe they should have more restrictions placed on them, so to speak. I mean, that was something that was brought up to me in various visits throughout the district as another option to consider. And then a fourth one is really came out of, number 4 really came out of the DSIT input session that we did, where people suggested, hey, maybe there's a hybrid example there where we could do, you have 1 or 2 district-wide elements, then you have 1 or 2 one building element. Could be a PLC. That was also another piece of good feedback that Rick, it came out of Rick's in-person. I joined via conference call with the TCEA leadership at the MEA building. One of the teachers, I think it was Kelly Rosher, elementary phys ed teacher, was saying, hey, we do stuff via department, and we aren't as connected with the building stuff. So, but they do operate with an elementary PLC component. So they're saying, let's do one of them could be a PLC or building level choice, and then one is teacher, totally teacher selected. So, so we've been talking so far about elements 1 and 2, and then any more comments about either elements 1 or 2, but then maybe we could jump into 3 and 4 next.
I want to talk about 4, so I'll wait, but if anyone has anything.
I shouldn't have said elements either, the options, 1 and 2.
Yeah. Sandra, the only thing that came up, as you probably recall, with the TCEA meeting was just making a distinction between option 2 and option 3, and that idea of it being customized. There was just, I mean, if we go down a road where those are really going to be heavily considered, we want to just make sure we're clear about the difference between the two.
Right.
Well, and I know that we talked quite a bit about number 2. Some of the issues with that is that the whole district could then end up all over the map with a real lack of focus district-wide if everyone was customizing all their elements.
Right, and that I think what was brought up with that was simply that we'd be back in the same place we were prior to Marzano, which was when every teacher was negotiating with their evaluator about what kind of data they'd be measuring and what goals they were writing, and like everybody was all over the place, like some people expressed at that meeting. And what I took away from that was that people were concerned with that too, that we didn't want to get back to a place where everybody was just doing their own thing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
I
so
think there's some strength if you've gone to those instructional round visits this year, that there's been some really common themes across K-12 and TCAPS. There's been some visions that we're all working towards. And I agree with you, Tack, and that we're all at different places in that, and how that plays out in my classroom might be different than how that plays out in your classroom. But because we are all sharing similar professional goals, I think that that's really helped unite us as educators in our district this year, more so than I've ever seen us in the past. I personally like option 4. I think it gives us some district ones, so we feel connected to the district as a whole. So we're part of TCAPS, and this is our role in that, and this is what our ownership and responsibility is. It gives our building some power to kind of mess around in our problem of practice and maybe look at some different researches, and for us to look at different buildings that are working on different elements and maybe learn from each other, trade some secrets. And then also the last one would be let my teachers who feel like I really want to go after organizing my students to process and deepen their knowledge, let them go after that one this year. They have some ideas as how they want to incorporate some Socratic seminars or some fishbowl discussions. Great, let's set that as a personal goal for you. But I really would like us to see at least stick to some district-wide goals. And I really like that piece. I feel like for once we've all been working on the same thing. And all we've heard all year is learning goals and scales. It's been nice to hear one thing all year.
I'd love to jump in if I could. I think, if I have it right, many of you have been in TCAPS for a very long time, and I'm kind of at the other end of that. This is my second year in TCAPS, and I have to say, when you're in TCAPS for a while, you kind of forget how big and disconnected all of the elementary schools and all of the teachers, and even just in a building, you can, if you want to, you can choose to kind of go it on your own. And that's okay, but it doesn't work for everyone, and it's not quite, I think without any common elements, you end up with this it's kind of like the haves and have-nots of teachers and TCAPS, right? If you have the connections and you have the people that work and that you go to, then you're great. But I will tell you, for new teachers, without a common element across the district, it's nearly impossible to grow yourself on your own.
Anybody else?
I actually think that's a really good point about new teachers. That's something where I think I see the support that's necessary for new teachers coming in. I don't know that I know that they're not as connected to our history as we probably like them to be, nor as connected to what we've been doing for the last few years. And so I think that's why I'm with Jesse on the idea of having something that connects us together, something that binds us together. But I think I've talked with Joe about having that problem of practice addressed as well. So it's that district need, building need, professional need, and that can be something that works together so that we can have commonality across the district, but also individual needs met. And for the buildings that want as much commonality as possible, 1, 2, 6, and 24 are there for them to bind onto if that's what they want to do. And I think that's why I'm leaning as, I think Jesse and I are sharing the same idea on that.
Yeah, 4 scares me. I think 4, I'd obviously leaning towards 2 or 3. I guess for the past several years, I've felt like I'm completely just going through the motions in terms of the evaluation process, not in terms of my teaching. I think, because I have not had any choice in what I'm can be focusing on in my professional development for school, I feel like I've been moving things from box to box in terms of like just filling out forms and doing what I'm supposed to do and posting things on the walls because that's part of my evaluation process. But it hasn't. I don't know. I just really feel that there needs to be more choice within the and that's not to say that teachers can do whatever they want or should be able to do whatever they want. I think in conjunction with their principal or their departments can get together and say, hey, we'd really like as a department to focus on these 2, but there's lots of different options within Marzano, and so I'm not advocating that everybody do whatever they want. When I first started teaching here, I remember people were doing like athletic goals. We picked a goal to exercise together as a staff, which is a great idea, but it's not maybe specifically connected to.
Yeah, we should revisit that goal, Tech. What year was that?
I can't keep up with you, Jeff.
Now.
So I'm not advocating for complete teacher choice. I'm just saying that in conjunction with the principal, and we asked our teachers to differentiate instruction with different students based upon where people are, and I really strongly feel that picking certain goals for the entire district is just becomes, even if it's only a couple and then we add more on top of that, it just becomes, all right, I'm just going to go through the motion. Teachers aren't connected to the, at least I can't speak for all teachers, I can just speak for myself, of course, but I no longer feel like it is a meaningful process, and it hasn't felt that way to me for several years, and with other teachers I've talked to as well. And
so, Tack, can I ask you a quick question about that? And I understand where you're coming from, but let me ask you this: what if we were to take a different approach in let's just say everyone aligned with number 4, just for example's sake, and you were like, that's really not motivating to me, but at the same time we looked at it from an emphasis basis, whereby you have been observed and your evaluator has indicated that you are highly effective, or you're innovative in terms of elements 1 and 2, and so as a result of you being in that position, your evaluator and you decide, well, if we're doing number 4 in the district, 1 and 2 are, let's just say those are the foundational elements, so I have to do 1 and 2, but you know what, I'm really going to place most of my emphasis and my effort and my learning, my professional learning, behind element 21 and 22, because that's really where I think I can make a difference in my classroom in domain question 4. So I've spent a lot of time already on the foundational elements 1 and 2, so I'm not going to place as much emphasis or time or work, because that work has already been done. I think I've refined my practice in that area, and now as a result of that, I'm going to focus mostly on, I'm just guessing which elements you might be picking, but say, element 21, which is organizing students for cognitively complex tasks, or engaging students in cognitively complex tasks, so that if you looked at, your effort in terms of 100%, you might say, 60% of my learning and my work this year is going to be based on that particular element. I'll spend 30% of my time working on the foundational elements, and I'll spend 10% of my time working on the building level element, so that it's not a case where your evaluator is looking at you like, you got to go 100% in all 4 of those elements. So just trying to look at it from an emphasis in terms of your learning from year to year, and that might be more motivational for you to think about it that way. I'm not advocating for 4. I'm just saying if we were to go with 4, that might be a way for you to think about it too.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess one of the issues though is that this new evaluation process is very teacher intensive. There's lots of paperwork for the teachers to fill out and with the Marzano stuff, and so I guess it depends. If I feel like I have to prove something that I've already proven by filling out lots of forms, and I'm spending a lot of my time on paperwork to prove that certain things that both me and my principal feel I've already mastered, then that's not necessarily a good situation. But so I guess it devil's in the details. It depends. I think it kind of depends on how that is regulated, I guess. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a distinction there. There's 2 different items. There's what items are the focus area for professional development or evaluation for a particular teacher, and then the other item is the implementation of that. There's actually probably less forms and stuff with Marzano as it pertains to these elements. The things teachers need to submit evidence on their own is more related to the planning and the reflection and things that everyone's going to have to do regardless of what classroom elements they've chosen, and part of it too is part of the fear I know with number 1 with every school doing the same elements, part of the fear is that, call it cookie cutter approach of everyone being kind of robotically doing the same thing all the time. But part of that has to get at too is we need to, as administrators and teachers, get a better understanding of the desired effect of these items that Marzano talks about in his research, and that they don't have to look the same all the time. You know, you think about a high school student going through his day, and it's maybe not engaging to a high school student to go through his day, and each of his 6 classes starts with, here's the learning goal, reflect on the scale, middle of the class, we reflect on the scale, end of the period, we look at the learning goal again and reflect on the scale. That should certainly be happening frequently, but should it happen 3 times a day in 6 different classes? No. You know, so there's like that implementation piece too. We've got to we've got to grow with and understand better over time.
Tech, wouldn't your concern about the busy work piece of it, or the paperwork, or probably need to start calling that screen work, I think, because it's really on the computer. But anyway, the point is that this is sort of just busy work that I have to do to satisfy my evaluator. Both my evaluator and I are finding it pointless, but somehow we feel like it has to be done. And I would think that that would apply, that concern, which I think is a very valid one, and we've got to dig into that about why we're feeling that that's necessary if it's not adding value to the process. But that concern is there regardless of whether you have freedom to choose elements or not, isn't it?
Yeah, the paperwork or computer work is definitely there, but I would like to spend my time as a teacher doing the computer work or paperwork focused on things that I think that I need to work on and that my principal thinks I need to work on. For the past several years, I've felt like I am, you know, when we started backward unit designs, I had already done them, but I had done them in a different way, so I spent the entire time transferring from the old boxes into the new boxes. And so yeah, I don't have a problem filling out work to prove that I'm doing what I should be doing, but I want to focus on what me and my principal decide are things that will help me move to the next level. I mean, there's like some teachers have classroom management problems, and there's a thing within Marzano where maybe those teachers should focus on that goal because that's where they are. And then there's other teachers who don't have classroom management problems, but it's the dead classroom. So I just want to I don't mind the paperwork. I just want to focus on paperwork that will actually lead me a better teacher.
So basically, what I'm hearing you say is that because I've mastered these elements, having to go through the process makes it meaningless because now I'm just filling out forms. Having to fill out forms on elements and go through that process on elements that I have not mastered and that I have the choice to go with, it would be valuable.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
I'm going to respond sort of because I think I'm in the same boat here. I like doing reflections on stuff that helps me realize weaknesses and strengths when it's meaningful to me. That's the work that I don't mind doing. And I think that's part of what we're getting at is that by having the choice and the selections of which parts of this we want to focus on, we get to really deepen our practice in a way that's the most meaningful for us. I think that's part of where you're headed, Tech, if I'm reading it right. Absolutely. That, you know, it's not about whether or not I want to fill out a form or not. It's about whether, the time that I'm going to invest, I want it to be meaningful for me too. Just like we ask our kids, when is it meaningful for them? When they have meaningful work to do, when they've got something that relates to their lives, it's real world, etc. And I think that's part of what's at work here is we want it to be real world for us too.
Can I ask you a question, Tech? What percentage, just quantify this for me, what percentage of your time do you think you've spent on paperwork that's just been busy work this year? I'm just curious.
Well, for me, this year I'm not being evaluated, so not a lot this year, which is maybe ironic since I've been complaining so much about it.
Yeah, I'm just finding a lot of humor with that, Tech. But keep going. It's still good input.
but I felt that in the past, even like I said with the evaluation the year before, and I felt so I guess I can go back to the backward unit design. I felt that my entire professional development, when we were focused on backward unit design, something that I felt that I was already good at. Well, I spent every 90-minute PLC, mostly every 90-minute PLC, and every regular staff meeting that we were given time to work on backward unit designs, that I wasn't growing as a teacher, and I want to grow as a teacher. I'm not a perfect teacher. I have a lot to learn and a lot of things I want to do better, and when I stop wanting to do better, then I need to retire. So I'm not asking. I just think that I want to make it meaningful for me and for other teachers I've talked to who feel like we're in the same situation. So that's
okay. So 0% because you're not being evaluated this year.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to put a number on it, Tack. I'm just trying to
what are the
understand.
numbers?
Okay, got it. Can I ask that question to anyone who's being evaluated this year? I don't know if you want to out yourself,
Sure.
but well, we know Sheila is because you're a second-year teacher.
Actually, I was kind of wanting to jump in. I want to say I'm curious. Don't you think that this whole conversation about how much work we're spending fulfilling time to meet elements for evaluation shows how important it is that elements 1 and 2 stay on our district radar? Because if you're actually providing learning goals and scales to students, and you're saying that it's something that's posted on your wall as a piece of paper, isn't that not there yet? Like, Sandra, you kind of hit on that. You were saying it looks different for everybody, and I think that I think so much of our district, and yes, not everybody, but so much of us are still so focused on what that looks like on a piece of paper instead of what it looks like for a learner in our classroom, to know where they need to go and how they're going to get there and where they are right now. Like, that's your piece of goals and scales. Jesse, sorry to answer your question. I think that I think the work I've done around goals and scales has been literally goal-focused, not piece of paper-focused. I'm focusing on what I want my students to know and where they are. And sometimes the goal and the scale are a piece of paper. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes the kids know what the goal is because they've set it for themselves. I think that if we're talking about how much paperwork we're doing, we're actually not doing that job at all yet. And I don't think I've done. I mean, except when I do my evaluations, I have to do a form beforehand and a form after, and a meeting with Jesse. So maybe 2 hours all year. Did that answer that question and more?
Yeah.
Well, would you read the chat and just see if in the chat there, Sheila, if I captured the first part of what you were saying related to the learning goal and scale being posted versus the cognitive process that kind of facilitates within the learner?
I would love to, but I'm not sure where it went.
Okay,
Oh,
chat
I
again.
got it. I see
Okay.
it. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I think, the discussion was this idea that the district needs a focus, and I think if we're saying that we're good, we're set, we don't have anything that we're still focusing on altogether, that means we're throwing out goals and scales, and the huge array of differentiator is for us as teachers. If it's not meaningful yet, it means we haven't found a way to do it in the right way yet. If it feels not meaningful because we haven't written them all down on pieces of paper, then we haven't actually done the work of figuring out what our learning goal is and the path and where our students are and how they'll know and how they'll get there.
Yeah, can I just add to
I
that?
think 1 and 2. You can summarize that. I think we should keep elements 1 and 2 goes right with it, doesn't it?
Yeah, can I just add to your comment? I think it's something that Tax said that I'm a little concerned about this, and I think we maybe need to go back to work on this in the district. I'm worried about the idea of if what I heard Tax saying was that he had backward unit plans, but he had them in a different template, so he had to transfer them all to the new template. And I hope that we get to a place in the district where we can recognize that what are the tenets of a backward unit plan, and not being worried about the boxes, but being more worried about the content of what's in the backward unit plan, so that we're not asking people to replicate work that has already been done. The thinking, the critical thinking, the analyzing, that needs to be done in a great unit plan versus, does it look like, because I'm going to tell you right now, I have teachers who don't use the exact same template in their backward unit plan, but still go through the same process, and it still comes up with the same rich reflection.
Right, and that's what I meant earlier by, we got to, part of this is how things are implemented. We can do really valuable stuff across the district with learning goals and scales, or we can, take some of that passion out of teaching by making it too prescriptive. We got to focus on the effect we're trying to get, and not necessarily everyone take the same symmetrical path to get there.
Well, I mean, that, I think, is the very definition of cookie cutter, right? What Tack was explaining that he had to do about taking from one box and just putting it in the other. And that's really very pointless work. So I 100% agree with you, Rick, in terms of that's meaningless. If they had it in one format, then I think that the Marzano platform maybe solves quite a lot of that because of the ability to upload. So you can upload different, as long as there's a backward unit plan and there's evidence of beginning with the end in mind about where we want to go with our lessons, which is what all has that great connection to the learning goals and scales piece. I think that the platform that we're now using with iObservation allows for that, so that teachers like Tack don't have to go through all this copying and pasting into a different platform. Brandy, would you bring back the image back up on the full screen of the options? Rick, you mentioned really wanting to take the time to distinguish between options 1 and 2. It was much earlier that you mentioned that, but I do want to take the time to do that right now. So number 2 is really, so any teacher across the district, every single teacher across the district, we have like 550 of them, would be able to pick any elements that they want, no matter what their student achievement data looks like, it would be total teacher choice. That's what number 2, no matter what student achievement, no matter what their evaluation rating, no matter what. Number 3 is different from the standpoint of that whether we decide on if it's student achievement data or if we decide on teacher effectiveness rating, that highly effective, the idea would be that there'd be tiers of freedom. I don't want to make it sound like there'd be people in handcuffs necessarily, but that so highly effective teachers might have total choice. For example, effective teachers we might have a little bit less choice with. Minimally effective teachers even less, and ineffective, it would probably be a very prescriptive set of elements for them. So that's what number 3 is really trying to, if it were the choice to go to have it based on effectiveness rating. If it were student achievement data, then there's a lot of detail that would still need to be worked out with this particular element about how that looks, but I'm just trying to explain it at a conceptual level. So the differences between 2 and 3 are total teacher choice regardless of anything, just teachers choose. Number 3 would be that we come up with some sort of tiered system based on some sort of data, whether it was student achievement or effectiveness rating or what have you. So I don't want to limit any more of the conversation relative to that. Any other input around this, or if we should really have a number 5 that would say anything else, and any other ideas that you folks on the panel would have in terms of a direction. Now is the time to share that as well.
This is kind of a side note, but it's very relevant, I think. Unfortunately, we're using the same word for what we're doing now as what we did a couple years ago, and we're calling it evaluation. I really feel like there's a different tone, there's a different purpose of what the work is that we're doing now. I think that the Marzano framework, which is a developmental framework rather than a evaluative check the boxes and I will tell you what you're doing wrong kind of framework, which is what I felt it had been in the past. That's why I think it's too bad we have to use the same word. I don't know what we can do to reframe that. I feel like whatever path we go down, if we're able to, I want to be able to present it in a way that reminds people that it's a developmental program, not one that we're looking to catch people doing things wrong. We're looking to catch people doing things right. At least that's what Marzano says.
Yeah, I agree. I don't mean to interrupt you, Dave, but I think the biggest job for me, and I've told my teachers this time and time again, is for me to help you document the impact you're having on student learning. I mean, it's to help you build a professional portfolio, right? As an outside observer, here are all the great things that I see happening in the classroom, and here's the evidence to say that your impact is of value to our kids. Like, I mean, 99% of the evaluation is to do that, is to help my teachers understand their impact in learning.
And to use feedback, whether it's reflective feedback or feedback from peers or feedback from an evaluator to grow and improve in your practice. Versus what we used to do, which was, I don't know what it's been like in every building, but I can tell you that principals have been giving more feedback this year than any year since I've been at Central High School. And what we used to do was visit in, a couple, 3 times, and that was what we based a teacher's evaluation on. And I think I wouldn't understand why we would want to stick with a system like that. That's not giving the teacher a fair shot at and illustrating what they're actually doing with kids. Do we have work to do in that? Yeah, absolutely. But this framework allows for us to see where a teacher is going with their work, or where they're at and where they're growing and what parts they need support with.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear Dave saying is that, and I 100% agree, is that the old model of evaluation was come in once or twice a year, sum up the teacher within a 30-minute, give a summative, and that's it. And it was very transactional. It was not done in the context of providing feedback, really, and then within that idea of a growth model and that sort of thing. And really what I think the Marzano evaluation system does is really tries to bring back in that idea of it's an instructional framework, and yeah, we're providing feedback based on that instructional framework, and that's really what evaluation should have always been. And just because we've experienced probably a poor model of evaluation, and that's our historical perspective, that's what we keep kind of weighing it against this and within the context of sort of the intensity that's come to us recently from the state of Michigan with lots of different law changes, and that kind of stuff is also mixed up in that soup of thinking about evaluation. But Angela, I also want to make sure that a lot of other people have been doing a lot of talking. I want to make sure we also get your perspective, and also any music. You are a music teacher, so.
Yeah, and I was going to jump in and say, one thing that we as a department have talked a lot about is that not only do we appreciate that we can talk about this and we're all on the same page across the district being evaluated, but also that this process actually is getting administrators into our classrooms more and getting that feedback throughout the year for those of us that were not as highly visited prior to Marzano, that it's really nice to get that feedback on a regular basis, because I've taught, obviously I haven't been with this district for very long, but I've taught in a lot of places where I never had a principal walk in my room except for the day they were evaluating me. So this process where it's ongoing and I'm always getting feedback on what am I doing well and what can I do better has really helped me grow this year especially.
So I just want to get this straight. You're saying you like it when an administrator comes in your room?
It's nice, it's nice every once in a while to have someone walk in the room.
I love
didn't
it.
hear anyone say that from West Senior High, Joe Esper.
Even if it's Jesse, you still like it.
Even if
All I
it's the
hear
last
about-
week of school and it's 3 principals.
Oh, that's right. It was Long Parker and I. I forgot about that one.
Yeah,
that was a
last
good
week
one.
of school. Yeah.
We fill out a lot of forms at West.
Just send me over a form there for me to fill out, boys.
So let's do this. We've only got about 14 minutes left on this call. I do want to sort of call the question, and you can abstain if this somehow makes maybe I'm springing this on our panelists that didn't know this ahead of time. But I'd really like you to use the chat feature and just make your thinking visible. Certainly not forcing you to do that if it's, I understand I'm kind of springing it on you, but it would be really helpful, I think, for me to have your individual opinion and then just support it with your thinking. So if you had to pick, if we were taking a vote, I'm not saying that we are, but it's good information for me to have. Kind of say, hey, my choice would be either 1, 2, 3, or 4, or here's another idea, and here's why, and put that in the chat. And then I just want also, while you're kind of thinking about that, I'll maybe speak more to the audience. Brandy, did we get any questions from our wide and numerous viewership?
We have 3 viewers currently, and we have no questions from them. I think I'm actually one of the 3. Also,
okay.
But I do know that I've heard people, when I've talked about this, they're curious kind of what the timeline is. So I don't know what our timeline for choosing and implementing is, but I do know that I have heard that question this week. So.
Okay, go ahead and type that question in the chat, would you, or in the question. Whatever I was reading, actually, when you were talking, I was reading David's. Shouldn't have been doing that. I was reading his chat.
That's okay. It is in the question. I just said what is the timeline for this. So.
Okay. Okay, so I'll answer that while people are. The timeline is that now that we've done, I want to reiterate what we've already done. So we've talked about this at DSIT. We've collected teacher responses relative to this at DSIT. Teacher and principal responses. We've done it with the TCEA with about 25 folks at the MEA office, TCEA leadership and association reps, etc. We've also done what we're doing today around this. Certainly I was hoping for a wider viewership and wider participation, but it is what it is. I know we're up against Joshua Davis and The Voice tonight. So so then where do we go from here? What next steps are? Next week I will plan to take the input that we've gathered here on this as well as those other sessions that I just named off, and I'll be meeting with my quote-unquote leadership team, which really consists of our core content area leaders, Rick as our Marzano leader, Toby as the instructional rounds leader for the district, and we'll be talking through kind of finalizing this decision, and then my goal is that by the end of next week we will, or maybe the beginning of the following week, but the goal really would be Friday of next week, that I would be able to push something out to principals and teachers across the district saying this is what the plan is for the 15-16 school year, and then that can just start everyone thinking about whatever we end up doing with the growth plans, which right now the current thinking around that would be that we would provide an opportunity in the fall for growth plans. But I think we still need to finalize that. But when we'll do growth plans, I know it's the goal of Marzano, I think, to do those in the spring. So, but anyway, we at least want to narrow down what's going to be the district level focus and get that out by Friday of next week. Okay, so let's read through. It looks like TAC, have you weighed in, or are you abstaining?
Now my tech advisor has left, so I'm a little confused. So I'll figure it out. But I also wanted to mention, though, I'm not against goals universal goals across the whole district. In fact, 3 or 4 years ago, when we were focused on not Hattie, but on Newman and higher order thinking and real world connections, I felt those were like broad goals and there's lots of different ways for teachers to fit in with that broad goal. And I think I felt good about those. The problem, I guess, one of the problems I've had with Newman is that these things don't feel like goals anymore. It feels more like a checklist. Like higher order thinking feels like a goal to me. Real world connections feel like a goal to me. Having a scale or those things feel like a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. And so because Marzano has felt much more narrow to me than Newman did, I think that's one of the reasons I'm having such trouble with agreeing to
more prescriptive, more
right.
Yeah.
I just feel like Marzano is much more narrow. It's just much. It's just it's not, none of it's bad. It's not bad. It's just a means to an end, though. And the end, in my opinion, is what Newman was talking about with the harder thinking and real world connections and substantive conversation, and that's. I just don't want to spend the next, however many years left I have in teaching, making sure that I prove that that a scale is being done in a certain way, or that I think I do have learning goals, and I think I use scales, but I don't but I might not do it in the same way that it's supposed to be done.
Rick.
So Tech, let me just jump in there for a second, because I think that is a kind of a place that we're at with our implementation, that we have to I think as a district and as principals, I think there needs to be some work done there. In what I'm getting at is, and I fully support the work that we did with Newman and the work that we did with triads and all of that. I really believe in that, and thinking routines and all of those things I think are wonderful practices that we shouldn't just abandon, because I think you're right, Newman's work should be embedded in what we see in Marzano too. I think the thing that we have to get to is, just in my opinion and my work and studying this stuff, is that we need to be sure that, like Newman, I'm not convinced that Marzano is that prescriptive. I'm wondering if it's more that we have made it more prescriptive, because, if there isn't a scale posted on the wall in the back of the room or the front of the room, then you aren't using learning goals and scales. And my reflection on that and what I've observed is, how you monitor student progress shouldn't be done the same in every classroom. Give teachers the latitude to decide how you monitor student progress, because we want students to take ownership of that and own that kind of practice, because it's good for them. But at the same time, not everybody has to do it the same. So that's where I think we have to kind of go with that. Goals and scales, great concepts, but does it have to be done the same in every classroom? No, I don't think so. I think
Rick,
that's...
let me just jump in real quick. So, Rick, the other thing I think I hear TAC saying is that a desire to move toward those elements that get at the rigor a little bit more too. Those elements that are in the second column under the purple, group there.
Addressing content.
Yeah. So I think that there's a ton. I see a real desire to dig into those more cognitively complex type elements, and I think that there's what we want to do then is provide room for that to happen.
I would agree.
I was just going to say that, because I have so many different things that I teach in 30 minutes, I don't have a scale for every single thing that I do posted on the wall. But it has been mentioned that absolutely the kids have to know where they're going and why they're getting there. And so I think that, at least for me, it's been very helpful to have someone come in and say, I can tell the kids know what they need to do and where they're going, even without a scale posted on the wall, if that helps.
Yeah, I think this is a lesson for, it's been something that as an administrator, being a part of lots of different meetings, it's always a really good, not that we'd have learning goals and scales necessarily, but it's certainly something that we need to say, hey, what's the purpose of this meeting and what kind of outcome are we trying to drive at to make the meetings that we have more focused, more deliberate, and having everyone understand, where's this going? Because I think a lot of times, just like what can happen in a classroom, if you don't really set the stage for that, there's a lot of stuff that'll be discussed and kind of that'll happen and be talked about and everything. But you kind of come away like, what was accomplished here? And I think that's the same kind of focus that the learning goals and scales and having kids, that for a teacher that helps really provide that kind of focus and goal-orientedness about what are we getting out of today's lesson or this unit or whatever, and that feeds right back into that backward unit designs. But we could also, that's work that I'm constantly struggling with in the meetings that I hold, about really wanting to make it meaningful, but also meaningful for the participants, but more so, I want us to accomplish stuff as a result of taking the time to get together and meet on something. And I think that certainly has application within the classroom. That we have, I, as a classroom teacher, I always had pretty nice goals that I wanted the kids to be able to reach at the end of the time. So.
Well, and I think too, and we've had some discussions. I know Sandra and I have, and Rick and I, about this is a process for the administration team too, and for us. And right now we've been really pushing about what feedback has been valuable to teachers. I want to see what other principals are saying. I want to see what type of feedback has moved the needle or has been more reflective or has really latched onto ideas. And right now we've really worked on getting in classrooms and consistently giving feedback and using the tool and making sure we're identifying evidence. So I would say for us as an administration team, our next step is now the quality of the feedback we're giving, how rich is it, and how can we really see the impacts of that. So I think it's a process too for us.
Okay, Brandy, will you put back up on the screen here as we're coming down to the end, the options? And so I'm not hearing anyone on this panel give a fifth option or one that hasn't been considered. I've seen lots of opinions about which of the four that are displayed, but I haven't. Any of you have any other ideas about a fifth one that hasn't been considered? Okay, so basically, what I think coming out of this will be that, again, next week I'll be meeting with our leadership, the district level leadership team will gather. That's my last sort of input session, and certainly I'll be sharing with them all of the input that we've gathered up until that point. And then this really is a decision that ultimately, I'll be kind of rendering the decision, but it doesn't come without, that doesn't mean, there's always a danger that, okay, you didn't listen. I have been absolutely listening at DCIT, absolutely listening when Rick and I've joined via conference call, but heard what the teachers at the TCAPS MEA office had to say, all listening to what you have to say on the panel here, but ultimately, I think that comes down to one person, as the district level leader in charge of instruction. I'm going to have to kind of make the call, and I know that everybody's not going to be happy with it. I get it, because we have a diverse teaching population, a diverse group of educators, all of whom have really strong opinions and have a lot of good thoughts to back them up. But ultimately, we're going to have to move forward, so I expect to be able to get that out by Friday. Any last words?
Yeah, Sandra, can I just say one other thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, but there hasn't been a lot of talk about the principal side of this and how principals are evaluated. We are using the Marzano framework, and maybe be a point in time where we'll kind of unveil that a little bit, but I just want the panel to know that there's a lot of skin in the game for principals. When you look at the data that's being collected on their observation results, how they're rating teachers, how often they're in classrooms, and even if you look at the metrics on the 25% of the data piece, there's plenty of reason why principals would want teachers to be successful in their building, because when teachers are successful, their evaluation rating improves. So in terms of a growth model, in terms of a support model for teachers to grow in their practice and become better, there's a lot of, in just my opinion and what I've seen, there's a lot of skin in the game for principals to help and support teachers to become better at what they're doing in the classroom with kids.
Yeah, and lastly, before we sign off, because we're over time, is that district level leaders are also being evaluated using Marzano. Paul Soma will be evaluating all of the executive team members using it. We're kind of getting started with that, but I think we do absolutely have kind of bottom up, top down. We're all in the same boat here as far as working with the Marzano framework. It does differ a little bit. The school level leadership has a different set of elements and emphases, because a principal's job is not exactly the same as a teacher's, and the same goes for the district level leadership one. But the absolute tie-in are the millions and millions of data points about what makes an effective district and an effective district leader. The millions and millions of data points that make an effective school leader. That's what feeds into the school level leadership model, and the same thing for the teachers. So let me just sign off here and say really appreciate all of you on the panel. Our viewers appreciate you taking the time to engage in this, and we'll until we meet another day. That's it. Let's go ahead and close it up, Brandy. Appreciate it.